He was a billionaire titan, the king of Wall Street. She was his silent, simple wife, unseen and unheard. In front of 20 million people on live television, he laughed and called her his greatest charity case. He thought he was untouchable, the master of his universe. He didn't know that his simple wife was the secret architect of his entire empire, and he definitely didn't know that she was just hours away from taking every single penny of it back. This is the story of how one public humiliation triggered the most calculated and brutal corporate takedown in modern history. The penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park wasn't a home. It was a statement. 3 floors of glass, steel, and marble, curated to within an inch of its life. It was less a living space and more a monument to Julian Thorne. And Julian Thorne was a man who loved monuments to himself. He was, by all accounts, the man who had everything. As the CEO and founder of Thorne Dynamics, he was the brash, charismatic face of modern finance. Forbes had just crowned him Man of the Year. His face, all sharp angles and a predatory smile, was plastered on the cover, the headline screaming "The Midas Touch." His wife, Elara Vance, was not on the cover. She was rarely in the picture at all. This morning, the apartment was a flurry of controlled chaos. Stylists, publicists, and assistants buzzed around Julian, who sat in a custom Italian leather chair like a king holding court. He was preparing for the biggest interview of his career, a live primetime special on the global business network GBN, with the network's star anchor, Mark Sterling. Elara watched from the doorway of the library. She was, as always, dressed simply. A grey cashmere sweater, dark trousers. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple knot. She was the muted beige background to his vibrant, screaming primary colour. "Arthur," Julian barked, not looking up from his phone. "Tell the GBN producer I want the chyron to read Founder and CEO, not just CEO. And make sure they use the Forbes cover in the B-roll. It's non-negotiable." "Already handled, Julian," his chief counsel Arthur replied smoothly. Julian finally looked up and saw Elara. His perfect smile didn't reach his eyes. "Ah, Elara, there you are. What do you think of the suit, Brioni? Bespoke." "It looks very sharp, Julian," Elara said. Her voice was soft, almost tentative. "Sharp? Yes?" He stood and straightened his tie. "You, on the other hand?" He circled her, a frown creasing his brow. "Is that what you're wearing?" A young stylist, eager to please, rushed over. "Mr. Thorne, we have the Chanel suit you approved for Mrs. Thorne." "Good. Go. Put it on," he ordered Elara with a dismissive wave. "We're on in 3 hours. You're sitting in the front row, for God's sake. You can't look like the help." Elara's face remained perfectly unnervingly still. She didn't flinch, didn't argue. She simply nodded. "Of course, Julian." As she walked away, Julian laughed to his publicist, a woman named Chloe. "My God, can you believe it? She'd show up in burlap if I let her. She's my little charity case. No idea what to do with the money I've given her." Chloe forced a laugh. Everyone in Julian's orbit knew the rules. Julian was the genius, Julian was the sun, and everyone else, especially his wife, merely orbited his magnificent glow. Elara went to their bedroom, a vast, cold space of white marble and grey silk. The Chanel suit was laid out on the bed. It was beautiful. It was also, in Elara's mind, a costume, a uniform for the role she played, the grateful, silent wife. She sat for a moment, not looking at the suit, but at her own reflection in the dark glass of the floor-to-ceiling window. The city skyline was laid out before her, a kingdom of light. His kingdom, everyone thought. She had met Julian 12 years ago. He was a junior analyst at Goldman Sachs, drowning in debt, but overflowing with a toxic, magnetic confidence. She was a postgrad at MIT, completing her doctoral thesis on predictive financial modeling. He was the dazzling speaker. She was the quiet listener. He saw her a shy, brilliant woman with no social connections, and saw a tool. She saw him a man with boundless ambition and a complete lack of scruples, and saw a vessel. He had pitched her an idea for a firm. He would be the face, the rainmaker. He just needed an edge. Elara was the edge. She built Prometheus, an algorithm, a black box of such complexity and predictive power that it didn't just beat the market, it was the market. It analyzed petabytes of data, weather patterns, geopolitical tensions, shipping manifests, social media sentiment, and executed trades with terrifying precision. Julian didn't understand a single line of its code. He just understood the results: money. Incomprehensible, staggering amounts of money. The agreement, scrawled on a napkin in a campus bar, was simple. He would be the face. She would be the engine. They would be partners. Then came the marriage. Then came the fame. Then came Thorne Dynamics, a company built entirely on her genius. And slowly partners became Julian Thorne and his quiet wife. Elara stood and touched the cold glass. He had forgotten that napkin. He had forgotten the late nights, the code, the architect of his success. He had come to believe his own hype that he was the Midas, the genius. He had forgotten that the person who builds the house also knows where all the load-bearing walls are. And she knew better than anyone exactly how to make the whole thing collapse. She calmly unbuttoned her sweater, her eyes fixed on the horizon. Tonight on GBN, he wanted a show. He had no idea what a show she was about to give him. The Global Business Network studio in Manhattan was electric. The set for The Sterling Report was massive, a gleaming amphitheater of glass and data streams designed to make its guests feel like they were at the center of the financial universe. Julian Thorne was born for this. He strode onto the set, shaking Mark Sterling's hand with a firm alpha male grip, flashing his signature smile for the cameras. He was a conqueror in his element. Elara was escorted to her seat in the front row, directly in Julian's line of sight. She was wearing the Chanel suit. She looked elegant, expensive, and completely invisible. Her hands folded primly in her lap. "Julian," Mark Sterling began, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. "Welcome, and congratulations on the Forbes cover. Man of the Year. It seems there's nothing Thorne Dynamics can't do." "What's the secret?" "The secret, Mark," Julian said, leaning in, "is that there is no secret. It's just grit. It's vision. It's seeing the board when everyone else is just looking at the pieces. While other firms are drowning in bureaucracy, we're agile, we're hungry, and I'm not afraid to make the hard calls." The interview was a masterpiece of self-aggrandizement. Julian was on fire. He spoke about his instincts, his gut, his unrelenting drive. He never once mentioned a team, an algorithm, or a partner. It was all I, me, my. Elara watched, her expression unreadable. The studio lights were hot, but she felt a chill settle over her. Then Mark Sterling shifted gears. "Julian, you've built an empire, but we all know no man does it alone. We have your wife Elara in the audience tonight, a beautiful woman." The camera dutifully panned to Elara, who gave a small, tight-lipped smile. "She's been with you since the beginning, before Thorne Dynamics. How much of this success do you credit to her? What role does she play in the life of the Midas man? The audience cooed. It was the perfect softball question. A chance for Julian to be human, to be gracious, to thank the woman who stood by him. Julian Thorne looked at Mark. Then he looked at Alara. And then, to the shock of everyone, he chuckled. It wasn't a warm, loving laugh. It was condescending, dismissive. Alara. Oh, Alara. She's fantastic, he began. The camera was tight on his face, which was gleaming with arrogant charm. Well, let's be honest, Mark. We all have our roles, don't we? He turned, pointing directly at Alara in the front row. The camera followed his gesture, putting Alara on a split screen with her husband. 20 million people were watching. Alara's greatest skill, Julian said, his voice dripping with faux affection, is her ability to organize. My closets are immaculate. The dinner party seating charts flawless. She's a wonderful hostess. Mark Sterling's smile wavered. This was not the answer he expected. So, she's your rock, your support system. My support system. Julian threw his head back and laughed. Mark, let's be real. A man like me, a man running at my speed. I need a partner who can keep up. Alara, she's not exactly a numbers person. She's simple. She's a comfort. He wasn't done. He was reveling in this in his own perceived magnanimity. I found her, you know, he continued, as if sharing a charming anecdote. She was just a student. No family, no connections. I gave her all this. He gestured at the studio, the lights, the life. I like to think of her, and I say this with all the love in my heart. I like to think of Alara as my greatest charity case. And look how she's blossomed. She's wearing Chanel. The studio was dead silent. The thud of that comment was so loud, so brutal, that even the crew winced. Julian, blinded by his own spotlight, seemed to think he'd just been charming. Mark Sterling, a true professional, was visibly stunned. Well, that's one way to put it. But the camera was still on Alara. She hadn't moved. She hadn't flinched. She hadn't cried. She simply sat there, her hands in her lap, her face a pale, still mask. And then she did something very strange. She looked directly into the camera lens. Not the studio camera, but the live feed camera. The red light camera. The one broadcasting her humiliation to the world. She held its gaze for 1, 2, 3 seconds. Her eyes were not the eyes of a victim. They were the eyes of a general. Then very slowly, she reached into her Chanel purse. She took out her phone. Julian was still talking. And the future of Thorne Dynamics is in AI, which I am personally. While he was pontificating, Alara typed a single 3-word text message and hit send. Execute Protocol Icarus. She placed the phone back in her purse, stood up from her front row seat, and without a single look back at her husband, walked out of the studio. The live feed cut back to a flustered Mark Sterling and a suddenly confused Julian. Where is she going? Julian stammered, his bravado finally cracking. I'm not sure, Mark said. We'll be right back after this break. The broadcast cut to a commercial for a luxury car, but in the control room, a producer was screaming, "Get a camera on her. Follow the wife." It was too late. Alara Vance was already in the elevator, her face as cold and hard as the marble in her penthouse. The show was over. The execution had just begun. To understand what happened next, one must understand the truth of Thorne Dynamics. The truth hidden behind layers of NDAs, offshore accounts, and Julian's colossal ego was that Thorn Dynamics was a lie. The real company, the one that actually mattered, was called Vance Algorithms LLC. It was registered in Delaware with its primary holdings managed by a trust in Zurich. Its sole owner and managing partner was Elara Vance. 12 years ago, in that college bar, Elara had listened to Julian's pitch. He was handsome, ambitious, and utterly compelling. But she wasn't a fool. She had read his personality in minutes. He was a narcissist. He needed adulation more than he needed oxygen. He would take her work, her Prometheus algorithm, and claim it as his own. She knew this. So she had made him a deal. "I will build the engine, Julian," she had said, sliding the napkin with her first lines of code toward him. "But you will never ever own it. You will be the face, the name, the CEO. You can have 90% of the fame. But I will retain 51% of the assets. Always." He had been so desperate for her algorithm, he would have agreed to anything. 51%, why not 50-50 partners? Because 50-50 implies a discussion. She said, her voice quiet. "This will not be a discussion. I am giving you a license to use my work. I am not giving it to you. 51%. My terms." He signed. He created Thorn Dynamics as the public-facing shell. Elara created Vance Algorithms as the quiet, ironclad holding company that legally owned the Prometheus intellectual property and, more importantly, 51% of Thorn Dynamics shares. For a decade, Julian had operated under the delusion that he was in charge. He controlled the public 49%. He made all the calls. He hired, he fired, he bought the penthouses and the private jets. He never realized that Elara, working from a small, secure home office that he never entered, was the system administrator. She had the root access. Prometheus wasn't just on the Thorn Dynamics servers. It was leased to them. The algorithm that ran their entire multi-trillion-dollar portfolio was piped in from an external secure server cluster in Switzerland, a server that only Elara Vance could access. She let Julian believe he was the master. She took her allowance, as he called it, which was a laughably small salary. What he didn't know was that Vance Algorithms was also running its own portfolio. The secret fortune. While Thorn Dynamics was making impressive double-digit returns that dazzled Wall Street, Elara was using the full unrestricted power of Prometheus in the dark pools in foreign exchange and commodities. She wasn't just making millions. She was making billions. This was the secret fortune, a vast liquid ocean of capital held at the elite Swiss private bank, Julius Baer. It was a fortune that dwarfed Julian's. It was a fortune he didn't even know existed. She had built in a fail-safe, a contingency. She had known from the moment she saw the narcissism in his eyes that a day like this might come. She had a team of lawyers on a permanent multi-million-dollar retainer, a cutthroat team from the most prestigious corporate law firm in the world, Cravath, Swain, and Moore. They had only one job to wait for her call. The call was Protocol Icarus. The name was her own private joke. Icarus, the boy who flew too close to the sun on wings built by his brilliant father. Julian had flown too high, forgetting that his wings were not his own. They were hers, and she was about to revoke them. Protocol Icarus, when initiated, set off a chain reaction. 1. The kill switch. The Prometheus algorithm lease would be immediately terminated. The feed to Thorn Dynamics would be cut. The algorithm would go dark. 2. The legal strike. The team at Cravath would file a pre-prepared 800-page lawsuit against Julian Thorne personally for breach of fiduciary duty, gross mismanagement, and misrepresentation of company assets. 3. The financial coup. They would simultaneously file a motion with the SEC and the NYSE citing majority shareholder rights to freeze all of Thorne Dynamics' assets. Lock Julian Thorne out of all corporate accounts and call for an emergency shareholder meeting to remove him as CEO. 4. The press release. A global press release already written would be sent to Bloomberg, the Wall Street Journal, and Reuters, announcing that Vance Algorithms was exercising its majority control and restructuring Thorne Dynamics, effective immediately. As Elara stepped out of the GBN elevator into the cool Manhattan night, her phone buzzed. It was a text from the lead partner at Cravath, Swaine and Moore. It read, "Icarus is in flight. All assets are secure. Godspeed, Ms. Vance." Elara hailed a cab, not the waiting Rolls-Royce Phantom that Julian had sent for them. Just a yellow cab. "Where to, lady?" the cabbie asked. Elara looked at her reflection in the partition, the Chanel suit, the face of the charity case. "Cravath, Swaine and Moore, Worldwide Plaza." She smiled. "And please take your time. I'm in no rush at all." Julian Thorne's euphoria lasted for approximately 90 seconds. As the sterling report cut to a chaotic commercial break, his phone, resting on the table, lit up. It was Arthur, his chief counsel. Julian ignored it. He was busy hissing at his publicist, Chloe. What the hell was that? Where did she go? Get her back. Julian, His phone buzzed again. And again. And again. A rapid-fire vibration that signaled panic. It was Arthur, then his CFO, then the head of his trading floor. "What?" Julian barked, finally snatching the phone. "This had better be good." "Arthur, Julian, thank God." Arthur's voice was thin, reedy, and terrified. "The algorithm is down." "What do you mean, down?" Julian snapped. "Reboot it. This is a GBN interview. I'm live. You don't understand," Arthur said, his voice cracking. "It's not down. It's gone. The feed is cut. The traders are looking at black screens. Prometheus is dark. We are blind, Julian. All active trades, they're just sitting there. The market opens in Asia in 2 hours. If we can't hedge..." A cold spear of dread pierced Julian's ego. "What do you mean, gone? Call the tech team." "I did. They said the access is terminated by the primary user. Julian, who is the primary user?" Julian's blood ran cold. "Elara." He stormed off the set, ignoring Mark Sterling's calls, and sprinted to the green room. He grabbed Chloe by the arm. "Where is she?" "Where is my wife?" She left Julian. She got in a cab." "Find her," he roared. He dialed Elara's number. It went straight to voicemail. He dialed again. Voicemail. His phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was his private banker at JP Morgan Chase. "Julian, what is going on?" The banker's voice was frantic. "We just got a notification from a legal firm. Cravath, Swaine and Moore. Something about an asset freeze, Julian. They're freezing everything. Thorne Dynamics, your personal accounts, your credit lines. It's all pending an SEC review." SEC. Julian felt the room spin. The Brioni suit suddenly felt 3 sizes too small. "They're citing majority shareholder complaints. Julian, who is Vance Algorithms." Julian collapsed into a chair. Vance. His mind raced. He had a vague, foggy memory. a name on a document he'd signed a decade ago, thinking it was just some tax shelter formality, a document Ilara had put in front of him. "Ilara," he whispered. "It's Ilara." Just then the TV in the green room, still tuned to GBN, flickered. A breaking news banner flashed across the screen. "We interrupt this broadcast," a new anchor said, her face grim. "This is a major story developing out of Wall Street. Thorn Dynamics, the multi-trillion-dollar fund, has just seen all trading activity halted. We are getting a press release." The text of the press release appeared on the screen. "For immediate release. Vance Algorithms LLC, the majority shareholder of Thorn Dynamics, has today filed an emergency motion to remove Julian Thorn as CEO, citing gross mismanagement and breach of fiduciary duty. All company assets have been frozen pending a full audit. Ilara Vance, the founder and CEO of Vance Algorithms and the chief architect of the Prometheus trading system, will assume direct control of all operations effective immediately." Julian stared at the screen. His face was white. "The chief architect," he read aloud. "Ilara Vance, CEO." His world, so solid and magnificent just 10 minutes ago, was dissolving. The Midas touch was a myth. The man of the year was a fraud. He wasn't the king. He wasn't even a player. He was just the loud, obnoxious mascot. His phone buzzed one last time. It was a text from an unknown number. He opened it. It was a link to a Bloomberg terminal feed. The ticker for Thorn Dynamics, THRND, wasn't just down. It was delisted, replaced by a new ticker, Vance. Below the link was a single message. "You called me ornamental. You forgot that ornaments are the first thing to go when the house is redecorated. The locks on the penthouse have been changed. Your things will be in storage. Goodbye, Julian." Ilara Vance sat at the head of a 20-foot mahogany table in a conference room at Cravath, Swain and Moore. The room on the 50th floor had a commanding view of the city. She was surrounded by the Icarus team, 4 of the sharpest corporate lawyers on the planet. She was still in the Chanel suit. She had taken her hair down. It fell over her shoulders, and with the removal of that one simple pin, she looked less like a quiet wife and more like a CEO. "Status," she said, her voice crisp. "Ms. Vance, the lead lawyer." A man named Harrison began. "The protocol is complete. 1. Prometheus. The system is dark to Thorn. It is 100% firewalled and secured under the Vance name. 2. Asset freeze. The SEC and NYSE have complied. All Thorn Dynamics accounts, corporate and personal, including Mr. Thorn's, are frozen. He can't buy a cup of coffee. 3. Filings. The lawsuit and the removal petition are filed. A judge has granted an emergency restraining order barring Mr. Thorn from entering any company property. 4. The press. As of 10 minutes ago, your press release is the #1 story on every financial network in the world. Ilara nodded. Good. Phase 2. Just then the door to the conference room burst open. Julian Thorn, his face a mask of purple rage, stormed in, pushing past security. "Ilara!" he screamed. Harrison and the other lawyers stood up. "Mr. Thorn, you are trespassing. Security!" "Get out!" Julian yelled, pointing a shaking finger at the lawyers. "I want to talk to my wife." Ilara held up a hand. The lawyers and security paused at the door. "It's all right, Harrison. Give us 5 minutes." "Ilara, 5 minutes," she repeated, her voice like steel. Harrison nodded, and the team filed out, closing the heavy doors behind them, leaving Julian and Alara alone in the vast, silent room. "What have you done?" he whispered, his rage collapsing into a desperate, hollow confusion. "My company, my money, you've destroyed me." "No, Julian," Alara said, standing. She walked to the window, looking down at the city lights. "I've destroyed your company. I've protected my assets. Your assets, my company. I built it from nothing." "Did you?" Alara turned, and for the first time Julian saw her, not the meek, simple wife. He saw the woman who had been standing behind him all along, holding the strings. "You didn't build anything, Julian. You were the brand ambassador. You were the face. I was the architect, the founder, the engineer. I built Prometheus. I structured the deals. I managed the risk." "That's a lie," he spat. You organized the closets." Alara almost laughed. It was a cold, bitter sound. "I let you believe that. It's what you needed to believe. You, the great Julian Thorne, Man of the Year. You couldn't stand the idea that your simple wife was the genius, could you? You who can't even write a simple if-then statement." She walked to the table and picked up a single thick document. "This," she said, "is the Articles of Incorporation for Vance Algorithms, LLC, signed by you 12 years ago. You thought it was a tax dodge. This is the document that leased Prometheus to Thorne Dynamics." She picked up another. "This is the Master Shareholder Agreement. 51% to Vance Algorithms, 49% to Thorne Dynamics. My signature and yours." "You tricked me. I protected myself," she countered, her voice finally rising, echoing in the boardroom. "I knew who you were from the day I met you. I knew your ego was a black hole. I knew you would one day try to erase me. So I built a firewall." He stared at her, the reality of his situation finally dawning. "The money? All of it? You're saying it's all yours?" "The company is mine," she corrected. "The money, well, that's the part you'll really enjoy." She walked to a small, secure briefcase and took out a thin file. She slid it across the table. "Thorne Dynamics," she explained, "was what I let you play with. It was your sandbox. The profits were excellent, but they were just a fraction." Julian opened the file. It was a single-page statement from Julius Baer, the Swiss bank. He read the name on the account, Vance Algorithms, LLC. Then he read the balance at the bottom of the page. He read it once, twice. His knees buckled. He grabbed the table for support. The number was not in the millions. It was not even in the low billions. It was a figure so vast it made Thorne Dynamics look like a corner bodega. This is," he stammered. "This is impossible." "That," Alara said, retrieving the file, "is the secret fortune, Julian. The one I made in my spare time, while you were busy posing for Forbes and telling the world I was your charity case. This is the money from Prometheus when it's not held back by your reckless, ego-driven trades." She stood before him, the Chanel suit, the symbol of his dismissive generosity, now looking like the armor of a warrior queen. "You humiliated me in front of millions, Julian. You called me simple. You called me charity. You built your identity on a lie, and you used me as the punchline." She walked to the door and opened it. The lawyers and security were waiting. "So here's the hard karma, as you like to call it. You are out. You are locked out of the company you thought you owned. You are locked out of the penthouse I paid for. The Rolls-Royce, my company car. As of this moment, Julian Thorne. You are simple. Elara, please, he begged. The Titan was gone. In his place was a terrified, broken man. We're married. Half of that is mine. Half? Elara looked at Harrison, who stepped forward. Mr. Thorne, the lawyer said, his voice devoid of emotion. You'll be served with divorce papers in the morning, and you'll find that the prenuptial agreement, the one your own high-priced lawyers drafted, is quite ironclad. Julian looked confused. The prenup. It says I keep my company. Exactly, Elara said, her voice soft. It says you keep everything in your name. And you do. You get to keep all 49% of a company that is now worthless. You get to keep the debt, the lawsuits for fraud, and the SEC investigation that's about to open into your personal misrepresentations to the market. She looked at him one last time. You get to keep your company, Julian. And I get to keep mine. Security guards took him by the arms. He didn't fight. He was a hollow shell. As they dragged him into the hallway, he looked back, his eyes wide, with the horror of his own spectacular self-destruction. Elara Vance didn't watch him go. She was already turning back to the table. Harrison, she said, get the GBN. I'm ready for my interview. The next 24 hours were a blur of financial and social carnage for Julian Thorne. The King of Wall Street became a pariah overnight. When he was escorted out of the Cravath building, he wasn't met by a Rolls-Royce. He was met by a swarm of reporters alerted by the GBN breaking news flash. Mr. Thorne, is it true you've been fired? Who is Elara Vance? How much did you misrepresent to your shareholders? He shoved through them a man possessed his Brioni suit, now crumpled, a visible symbol of his fall. He tried his credit card at a subway station. Declined. He tried to call his friends, the other titans of industry. No one picked up. He was a ghost. The hard karma, as Elara had called it, was swift and brutal. The Wall Street Journal ran a scathing front-page story. Throne of Lies. The Midas Man was a mascot. The article detailed with leaked precision how Julian's instinct was just him taking credit for Elara's algorithm. Forbes, in an unprecedented move, issued a full retraction of their Man of the Year cover. Their statement was humiliating. We were misled by the fraudulent claims of Mr. Thorne. The true Man of the Year was in fact a woman, Elara Vance. His social clubs, from the Metropolitan Club to the New York Athletic Club, suspended his membership, citing conduct unbecoming. But the worst was the legal fallout. The SEC investigation was no longer a threat. It was a reality. He was being investigated for securities fraud, for lying to investors, for misrepresenting the core assets of his own company. The 49% of Thorne Dynamics he owned was now a 49% stake in a mountain of lawsuits and debt. He wasn't just broke. He was catastrophically in debt. He ended up in a cheap hotel in Queens, paid for with the last $200 in cash he had in his pocket. He watched the small, grainy TV as Mark Sterling on GBN conducted the interview of his career. "Welcome back," Mark said, his face electric with the scoop. "My guest tonight needs no introduction, though it seems we've all been introducing her incorrectly. She is the founder of Vance Algorithms, the chief architect of the Prometheus system, and the new CEO and majority owner of the newly restructured Vance Thorne Global. Please welcome Elara Vance." The camera panned to Elara. She was in the same studio where just 24 hours earlier she had been publicly shamed. She was wearing a simple, elegant dark blue dress. She looked powerful. She looked comfortable. She looked free. "Ms. Vance," Mark began. This is without question the most stunning corporate takeover in a decade. Tell us, why now? Elara looked into the camera. She was not the same woman. Her voice was clear, confident, and resonated with authority. My work has always been my priority, Mark. For 12 years I was content to be the architect, not the face. I value privacy. I value the data. But it became clear that the public face of the company, Mr. Thorne, was no longer aligned with the company's core values of integrity and data-driven truth. He was your husband, Mark pressed. He humiliated you on this very set. He did, Elara said without emotion. He made the critical error of confusing quiet with weak. He thought I was an ornament. He forgot that the most valuable things, the patents, the source code, the ownership deeds, are kept quiet, kept in a safe, not because they are fragile, but because they are priceless. And the company. What happens now? Now, Elara said, the market finally gets the truth. Vance Thorne Global will be a company built on transparency, not ego. The Prometheus system, which I am now upgrading, will continue to be the market leader. But its success will be shared by its entire team of brilliant engineers, data scientists, and analysts, not just by one man in a good suit. In his motel room, Julian threw the lamp at the TV. The screen cracked, but Elara's calm, powerful face remained. He had spent 12 years building a monument to himself. It took her 12 hours to tear it down brick by brick and build an Ephor on its ruins. He hadn't just lost his money. He had lost his name, his power, and his one single great asset. He had flown too close to the sun. He had forgotten she was the one who built it. The months that followed the GBN interview, what Wall Street had already dubbed the Icarus Protocol, were not a transition of power. They were a revelation. Elara Vance did not just take over Thorne Dynamics. She stepped out from behind the curtain to claim a throne she had built but never sat in. Her first 100 days as CEO of the newly minted Vance Thorne Global became a legend, a case study taught at Harvard Business School. She did not, as the market feared, burn the company to the ground in a fit of scorned wife rage. She executed her plan with the same chilling, dispassionate logic that had made her algorithm the most powerful financial tool in history. Her first act was to convene an emergency board meeting. The old board, Julian's hand-picked collection of golf partners and old-money sycophants, gathered in the opulent, dark wood-panelled boardroom on the 80th floor of Thorne Tower. They were prepared for a fight, or perhaps a tearful plea. They were not prepared for Elara. She walked in, not in a Chanel suit, but in a simple, dark grey Roland Mouret dress. She carried a single, slim laptop. She did not sit at the head of the table. She stood at the front of the room by a data screen. "Good morning, gentlemen," she said. Her voice was quiet, and the acoustics of the room, designed to amplify Julian's boom, forced them to lean in. "The company you thought you were on the board of no longer exists. Julian Thorne was not a CEO. He was a brand, and a deeply fraudulent one." One of the directors, a crusty real estate mogul named Marcus Brandt, scoffed. "Now see here, Elara, Mrs. Thorne. You can't just—" "I can," she interrupted, and with a click the main screen lit up. It was not a presentation. It was the Prometheus dashboard. The real one, not the simplified, flashy version Julian used. "This," she said, "is our company. For the last 5 years, Prometheus has been running 2 sets of simulations. The first, Model J, was the one you saw. It was the one Mr. Thorne used based on his gut instincts. It was high-risk flashy and outperformed the S&P 500 by 18%. Very impressive." She clicked again. A new set of data appeared. This is Model E, my personal model. The one Mr. Thorne was not authorized to see, as he found its methodology boring. It is a low-risk, diversified, long-term model. It also, she paused, outperformed the S&P 500 by 42%. The room was silent. While Julian was buying private jets and skyscrapers to soothe his ego, he was actively leaving 24% of our potential earnings on the table. He wasn't just a fraud, he was bad at his job. She turned to face them. Vance Thorne Global will now be run exclusively on Model E, the Thorne Tower, which costs us $40 million a year in prestige and taxes, is being sold. I've already accepted an offer. We are moving our headquarters downtown to the 300 Fenchurch building, which Vance Algorithms has owned for 6 years. It's LEED certified, and the property taxes are a fraction of the cost. You owned the building, Brandt stammered. I did. Just as I own 51% of this company. This is not a discussion. This is a notification. Julian's entire team, his publicist, his legal counsel, his chief of vision, which I've learned was a man he paid $2 million a year to play racquetball with, are all terminated, effective immediately. She then introduced her new team. She had poached Dr. Aris Thorne, no relation, the head of predictive analytics at Google's DeepMind. She brought in a new COO, a woman who had quietly run the largest sovereign wealth fund in Norway. She had, in 72 hours, assembled a team of architects who had been, like her, overlooked and underestimated. The old board was gutted, restructured, and reformed. By noon, the King's Court had been entirely dismantled and replaced by a cabinet of true geniuses. The media, of course, was in a frenzy. They were desperate to paint Elara as a black widow or a dragon lady. They sent their sharpest, most cynical journalist, Rebecca Fry, of the Wall Street Journal, to get the first exclusive interview. Fry arrived at the new minimalist downtown offices expecting a woman scorned. She found a CEO. Ms. Vance. Fry began, her voice edged with skepticism. Your ex-husband is facing multiple indictments. You've seized control of a $12 trillion portfolio. A lot of our readers see this as the most expensive and most brutal divorce in history. Was this in the end just about revenge? Elara, sitting across from her at a simple, unadorned desk, looked at her. Revenge is a poor financial model, Ms. Fry. It's too emotional. It's messy. My algorithm doesn't account for revenge because it's an irrational variable. So what was this? This, Elara said, was a correction. The system had a bug, a critical error that was causing instability, misallocating resources, and threatening the entire structure. Julian Thorne was the bug. I just debugged the system. You call your husband of 12 years a bug. He called me a charity case in front of 20 million people. Elara countered, her voice remaining perfectly level. He saw me as an ornament. I simply chose to see him for what he was, a non-performing asset, a liability, and I did what any good CEO would do. I cut the liability and protected my assets. Fry, for the first time in her career, was at a loss for words. Elara took her to the new server room, the true heart of the company. It was a cold, vast, humming space. Julian, Elara explained, liked to say he had the Midas touch. He liked to tell people he could feel the market. This is what was actually doing the work. Not a touch, not a feeling, just 100 petabytes of raw data processed through a quantum model I designed during my postdoc at MIT. Do you know what his last gut decision was? He wanted to short the entire US dollar to buy a controlling stake in a chain of luxury. Yodeling resorts in Switzerland. Prometheus calculated an 89.9% chance of total catastrophic failure. I, of course, vetoed the trade. Rebecca Fry's resulting Wall Street Journal article was a bombshell. The headline was simple: "Don't call it revenge, call it a reboot." The article and the accompanying Forbes cover, "The Architect," how Elara Vance quietly built and then saved Wall Street's biggest empire, recoded the narrative. Elara wasn't the wife who took the company. She was the founder who had finally taken it back. The Vance ticker didn't just soar. It became the single most stable and trusted stock on the planet. And Julian. His free fall was as spectacular as his rise. The hard karma was not just financial, it was total. His trial was a pathetic spectacle. Stripped of his money and his high-priced Cravath lawyers, who now worked for Elara, he was left with a court-appointed defense attorney who looked perpetually exhausted. Julian, sallow and thin, in an ill-fitting suit, tried to play his old hits for the jury. "I was the vision," he declared from the stand, his voice cracking. "I was the rainmaker. She was just the numbers. She's lying. She tricked me. She was the help, my charity case." But the prosecution, armed with terabytes of data from Elara's own servers, painted a different picture. They showed the jury the emails where Julian explicitly claimed credit for trades that Prometheus had run. They showed the reports he had signed full of fraudulent numbers he hadn't even bothered to read. The final nail, however, came from Elara herself. She was called as a witness for the prosecution. She walked into the courtroom, not with triumph, but with the same calm precision. She did everything. The prosecutor asked the killer question, "Miss Vance, is it your testimony that your ex-husband, Julian Thorne, knew he was committing securities fraud?" Elara paused, her gaze resting on Julian for a single, cold second. She could have buried him. She could have said yes. Instead, she gave the truth. "Mr. Thorne is a man of profound self-belief," she said, her voice clear in the silent room. "To know one is committing fraud implies an understanding of the truth. Mr. Thorne does not concern himself with data that contradicts his own narrative. He didn't understand the numbers, so he invented his own reality. He wasn't just lying to the shareholders, he was and is lying to himself. The fraud was a necessary byproduct of his own pathological need to be seen as a genius. It was more devastating than any accusation. She hadn't just called him a liar. She had proven him an incompetent, arrogant fool. She had destroyed him with data. The verdict was swift, guilty on all counts, the judge citing the staggering arrogance and willful ignorance of the defendant, sentenced him to 7 years in a minimum security federal prison. His 49% stake in the old Thorne Dynamics was seized by the government to pay the first wave of SEC fines. He was left with nothing, not even his name, which was now synonymous with failure. 1 year later, Elara Vance stood at a podium at her alma mater, MIT. She was not there as a CEO. She was there as an alumna. The auditorium was packed. "My name is Elara Vance," she began, her voice warm. "For over a decade I had another name. A name that came with a beautiful penthouse, expensive suits, and a very specific role to play. I was the quiet wife, the support system, the simple one." A murmur went through the crowd. "Last year," she continued, "I was called in front of 20 million people a charity case, and the man who said it, he was half right. I was his charity. He gave me so much. He gave me a front row seat to watching a man be utterly consumed by his own ego. He taught me that vision without data is just a hallucination. He taught me that charisma without integrity is just a con. And he taught me that if you build something, anything, a company, a line of code, a life, you must own it. You must protect it. And you must never, ever let someone else put their name on your work. He thought that humiliation would break me. But to an engineer, humiliation is just data. It's a stress test. It's the system showing you in no uncertain terms where there is a critical structural flaw. She smiled, so I fixed the flaw. She announced the launch of the Vance Foundation and its flagship program, the $1 billion Prometheus Grant. This grant, she explained as the room gasped, is for the quiet ones. It is for the student in the back of the lab at 3 a.m. It is for the women who are told they are not a numbers person. It is for the architects, the engineers, and the coders who don't want the spotlight. They just want to build the future. It is for the people who do the work. She looked out at the sea of brilliant young faces, the future architects of the world. My ex-husband was right about one more thing. I am a charity case, and I learned from his example. His charity was a performance designed to make him look good. My charity is designed to do good. His was an investment in his own ego. This is an investment in all of you. He thought he was Midas, she concluded. He forgot. They thought Midas was a tragedy, a story about a fool who valued gold over a human being. The real power isn't in turning things to gold. It's in knowing what's truly valuable. Thank you. She left the stage to a thunderous standing ovation, not as Alara Thorne, the victim, or Alara Vance, the wife, but as Alara Vance, the architect, the woman who had been humiliated in front of millions, and who had turned that humiliation into the foundation of an empire, one built not on lies or ego, but on the unassailable, beautiful, and brutal logic of the truth. Alara Vance proved that the quietest person in the room is often the most powerful. She turned her public humiliation into her coronation, proving that the best revenge isn't just living well. It's taking back what is rightfully and legally yours. Julian Thorne learned the hard way. Never underestimate the architect. He thought he was the Midas, but he was just the fool, and she was the gold. What did you think of Alara's masterful plan? Was Julian's downfall a case of hard karma, or was it just a brilliant business decision? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you loved this story of drama, revenge, and ultimate justice, please show your support by hitting that like button. Every like helps our channel grow. Don't forget to share this video with a friend who loves a good story of a Titan's fall. And most importantly, if you want more real-life drama and tales of karma, make sure you subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell. We read every single comment, and your support helps us create more content just like this. Thanks for watching.